My coworker is stealing my ideas. The moment that broke me was sitting in the big quarterly meeting, watching my coworker stand at the front of the room, presenting my idea as if it had been his all along. It wasn't some tiny suggestion or minor tweak. It was the project plan I had been working on for weeks, late nights at my kitchen table, pouring myself into every little detail. I had carefully built a model, run numbers, even prepared supporting notes. And here he was, confident smile, smooth voice, my exact words rolling off his tongue. And my manager, she was eating it up, nodding, taking notes, saying things like, "This is exactly the kind of forward-thinking approach we need." The room clapped for him, applauded him. For my work? I sat there frozen, my chest pounding, my face hot. I wanted to shout, to stand up and say, "That's mine," but I didn't. I swallowed the lump in my throat and stared at my notebook instead, my pen shaking in my hand. Because here's the terrifying part. This wasn't the first time he'd done it. And in that moment, with everyone clapping for him, I knew it wasn't going to be the last. What I didn't know yet was how far he was willing to go, and how much it was going to cost me to finally stop him. When I first started at this company, I thought I had finally landed the job that could shape my career. I was 19, barely out of college, eager to prove myself. I loved brainstorming, problem solving, and I quickly earned a reputation as someone who came up with fresh ideas. Enter Mark. Older than me by maybe 10 years, charming in that way some people just are. He knew how to make people laugh, how to make bosses feel important, how to carry himself like he belonged. Honestly, I liked him at first. He was easy to talk to, and he made work feel less stiff. The first time I shared an idea with him, it felt natural. We were staying late, both tired, both frustrated at a system glitch. He asked me, "What would you do to fix this mess?" So I told him. I laid out a solution I had been mulling over. He nodded, thoughtful, said, "That's smart." The next week, in a team meeting, he casually brought it up. Not as mine, not as ours, but as his. Everyone nodded, impressed. And me, I brushed it off. Maybe he had forgotten I said it. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But then, it happened again. And again. At first, it was little things. A phrase I'd said in passing suddenly showing up in his email to the team. A half-formed suggestion I made at my desk suddenly becoming his proposal. Each time, I told myself I was imagining it, that it wasn't worth making a scene over. But then, the stakes started getting higher. One night, I stayed late drafting a detailed improvement plan for one of our biggest accounts. It was messy, still in progress, just notes and rough sketches on my desk. The next day, I came in and found those same ideas woven neatly into Mark's presentation slides. That's when I felt the pit form in my stomach. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was theft. And yet, I didn't confront him. Why? Because I was scared. Scared of looking petty, scared of losing my job, scared of going up against someone everyone seemed to like and trust. So I said nothing. But silence is dangerous, because the more I stayed quiet, the bolder he became. It all built up to that quarterly meeting, the one where he unveiled my project plan, complete with points I had carefully written out in my private notes. He presented it flawlessly, and when my boss called it visionary, I felt my stomach drop like I was free-falling. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake replaying it over and over in my head. My mind raced with questions. Was I overreacting? Should I have spoken up sooner? Was it already too late to fix this? The next morning, I walked into the office and everything felt different. People were congratulating him. I heard someone say, "Mark really outdid himself this time." Meanwhile, no one looked at me twice. It hit me then. If I didn't act soon, my entire career, everything I had worked for, was going to be swallowed whole by him. But what could I do? How do you fight someone who's charming, respected, and clever enough to twist things in his favor? I didn't have the answers yet. All I had was the dawning certainty that I couldn't keep ignoring it. Because the next idea he stole from me, it wasn't just going to cost me credit. It was going to cost me everything. After that quarterly meeting, something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. Every time I saw Mark in the hallway, heard his voice in a meeting, or read one of his emails, my blood boiled. I kept thinking, he's stealing pieces of me, one by one. Still, I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to storm into my manager's office and tell her everything. Another part of me whispered, "Don't. What if she doesn't believe you? What if she thinks you're just jealous?" So instead, I started small, quiet, careful. I opened a new folder on my personal computer at home and labeled it Proof. Every time I had an idea, I typed it out, added the date, and saved it. I started emailing myself copies of notes, time-stamped. In meetings, I began jotting down the exact words I said and the time I said them, just in case. It felt paranoid, like I was preparing for war against someone who didn't even notice I had noticed. But deep down, I knew he'd cross the line again. And when he did, I had to be ready. Meanwhile, on the surface, I tried to act normal. I laughed when people joked, I nodded in meetings, I even forced myself to have casual conversations with Mark, even though every word out of his mouth made me want to scream. One day, he came over to my desk, leaned casually against the divider, and said, "Hey, got any bright ideas for that client call tomorrow?" His tone was playful, light, like we were teammates. But inside, I froze. This is how he does it, I thought. He asks, he listens, and then he takes. So I smiled tightly and said, "Not yet, still thinking." Then I turned back to my screen, pretending to be busy. I saw his smirk falter for just a second before he walked away. That tiny moment gave me a rush of relief. Maybe if I stopped feeding him, he'd stop stealing. But I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, I noticed him circling more often, asking me innocent questions, hovering by my desk when I was scribbling notes, even staying late some nights, something he had never done before, almost as if he wanted to keep an eye on me. It was suffocating. I started hiding my notes, closing my laptop the second I stood up, even carrying my notebooks with me to the bathroom. It felt ridiculous, but I couldn't shake the fear that he'd sneak a look the second I turned my back. And yet, despite all my precautions, he still managed to get one step ahead. The breaking point came during a smaller team meeting. I had been working on a new strategy, nothing official yet, just an idea I'd been refining in my head. I hadn't told a soul, not even in writing. And then, out of nowhere, Mark casually floated it during the meeting. The exact structure, the same phrasing I had been rehearsing silently in my commute. It was like he had reached into my brain and stolen it straight from my thoughts. I felt my stomach lurch, my palms started sweating. How? How could he possibly know? Everyone around the table leaned in and passed. My boss scribbled down notes. Someone said, "That's brilliant, Mark." And me? I sat frozen, unable to breathe, feeling the walls close in around me. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about sharing too much or leaving notes out. This was deeper, more dangerous. Because somehow, some way, he was getting to my ideas before I even had the chance to speak them. After that meeting, I couldn't stop shaking. It wasn't just anger anymore, it was fear. How had Mark pitched an idea I had never spoken out loud? One I hadn't written, hadn't shared, hadn't emailed? I kept asking myself, am I losing it? Did I somehow mention it in passing and forget? But the answer was no. I knew it in my bones. That idea had lived only in my head. So how did he know? The next few days, I moved through the office like a ghost. I barely spoke. I kept my notebooks locked in my bag. I even started taking long walks during lunch just to clear my head. But paranoia doesn't leave easily. At home, I started checking my phone for signs of hacking. I scrolled through my emails, convinced he had somehow gotten into my account. I even taped over the little camera on my laptop, the one that stared at me when I worked late at night. Still, no matter how careful I was, Mark stayed one step ahead. In the following week, he pitched another idea I had been sketching out privately at home, something I'd written in my personal journal, on paper, never typed, never shared. That was when my paranoia became terror. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I stayed in the office after everyone left, sitting at my desk in the glow of the computer screen, just thinking, running through every possibility. Had he somehow bugged my desk? Was he eavesdropping on my phone calls? Was he hacking my cloud storage? Or was I, and this thought nearly broke me, imagining it all? What if I was making myself the villain's victim in a story that wasn't even real? What if he wasn't stealing? What if I was just paranoid? The idea dug into me like a thorn. I didn't want to admit it, but I started wondering if maybe I needed help. But then something happened that ripped away any doubt. Late one evening, as I was packing my bag to leave, I passed by Mark's desk. His monitor was still on, glowing in the dark, and there, open on his screen, was a file with my name on it. I froze. My throat went dry. The screen showed a folder, tucked away in his private drive. Inside were multiple documents. I didn't click. I couldn't. I was terrified of getting caught. But even just seeing my name in that folder, it was enough. Enough to tell me this wasn't in my head. Enough to prove that somehow, some way, he was collecting my ideas. And that meant one terrifying thing: he was watching me closer than I ever imagined. After seeing my name on Mark's computer, I couldn't unsee it. The image burned itself into my brain. A folder, my name, my ideas, sitting there on his drive, like I was some project he was cataloging. From that moment, my world started unraveling. I went home that night shaking. I barely slept. When I closed my eyes, I kept picturing him scrolling through my notes, copying my thoughts, laughing at how easy it was to stay ahead of me. By morning, I was a wreck. I stared at myself in the mirror before work, pale skin, sunken eyes, trembling hands, and whispered, "Pull it together, just pull it together." But the more I tried, the more cracks showed. At work, I couldn't focus. I second-guessed every word I spoke in meetings, terrified it would be stolen. I kept checking my bag, my notebooks, even my phone, like some invisible hand might reach in and snatch them away. My coworkers started noticing. One asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was just tired, but behind my fake smile, I was spiraling. At home, it wasn't better. I stopped talking about work with my family because even mentioning Mark's name made my chest tighten. I started working late, not because I had to, but because I didn't want to be alone with my thoughts. My sister visited one weekend and said, "You've changed. You're jumpy all the time. What's going on?" I wanted to tell her everything, to spill the truth about the stolen ideas, the paranoia, the folder with my name. But how could I? It sounded insane. If I said it out loud, she might think I needed help. So I swallowed it down and just said, "Work's been stressful." She didn't look convinced. Meanwhile, Mark was thriving. Every day, he walked into the office with that same smug confidence. Every week, he pitched another idea that sounded eerily close to something I had scribbled in my notebook days earlier. And every time he spoke, my boss lit up with admiration. "Mark, that's brilliant. Mark, you're such a forward thinker." I wanted to scream, but instead, I started documenting everything obsessively. I backed up files, saved drafts, wrote physical notes, and photographed them with timestamps. My proof folder grew bigger and bigger, like a shield I was building for the day I'd finally expose him. Still, part of me wondered, what if it wasn't enough? Then came the night that changed everything. I stayed late again, hoping the office would empty so I could think without his shadow looming over me. Around 9:30, the floor was silent, only the hum of computers and the buzz of fluorescent lights. I packed up to leave, but as I walked toward the exit, I passed by Mark's desk again, and this time, he was there. Not just there, but leaning over his computer, headphones in, completely focused. I slowed my steps. His screen glowed bright in the dark office. I caught a glimpse. Lines of text, words I recognized instantly, because they were mine. It was my private draft, the one I had saved at home, the one I had never once uploaded to the company drive. My stomach flipped, my knees almost gave out. Somehow, some way, Mark had gotten into my personal files. I stumbled back into the shadows, heart racing so loudly I thought he might hear it. I couldn't confront him, not yet. But as I stood there, hiding in the dark, watching him scroll through my work like it belonged to him, I realized the truth. This wasn't just workplace theft anymore. It was something far more dangerous. The night I saw Mark scrolling through my private draft, something inside me broke. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This wasn't exaggeration. He had crossed a line so deep, so personal, I couldn't even breathe. How did he get my files? Was he hacking into my home computer, my cloud, my phone? The thought made my skin crawl. It meant he wasn't just watching me at work. He was in my life, my safe spaces, my head. I went home trembling, clutching my bag like it might protect me. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, planning, replaying every possible outcome. By morning, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I walked into work with fire in my chest, my proof folder clutched in my bag, my phone loaded with screenshots and timestamps. My hands shook as I sat down, but this time, it wasn't fear, it was rage. The weekly team meeting started. As always, Mark was confident, leaning back in his chair, smirking like he owned the room. And then, he did it again. He opened his mouth and pitched an idea that wasn't his, my idea, the one from the draft I had written in my bedroom just 3 nights before. Everyone leaned in, my boss's eyes lit up. "Mark, that's brilliant." I couldn't take it anymore. That's not his idea. The words shot out of my mouth before I could stop them. The room froze. All eyes turned to me. My face burned, but I pushed forward. "That's my work. I wrote that. I have timestamps, files, everything. He's been stealing my ideas." The silence was deafening. Mark laughed, actually laughed. "What are you talking about? That's insane. Why would I need to steal anything from you?" But my hands were already moving, pulling out my phone, laying down evidence. The drafts, the emails, the dates. One by one, I showed them. The exact words he had just spoken, written in my files days earlier. My boss's expression shifted from confusion to shock. My coworkers murmured, their eyes darting between me and him. And then, I said it, the part that made my voice crack. "He has access to my private work. He's been getting into files I only save at home. I don't know how, but I saw him. I saw my name in his folders." The air turned thick. Mark's smirk faltered. For the first time, he looked rattled. "Prove it," he snapped. But he didn't sound confident anymore. The meeting ended in chaos. HR was called. IT was pulled in. My boss demanded to see Mark's drive. He fought it, protested, but eventually they made him open it. And there it was. Folder after folder, my name, my drafts, my notes. The room went cold. HR's face was stone. My boss's jaw tightened. Mark tried to spin it, saying we collaborated, that I had shared things, but no one was buying it. The evidence was too clear. He was caught, exposed. And yet, as they let him out of the room, his eyes locked on mine. No fear, no guilt, just a look that sent ice down my spine. A look that said, "This isn't over." It's been 3 weeks since Mark was escorted out. HR swore he'd never set foot in the building again. They told me to focus on healing, to move forward. But last night, as I was working from home, a new file appeared on my desktop, untitled. I opened it. Inside was a single sentence. "You can't protect what's in your head."